Hello everyone and welcome to another video. So I'm going to be bringing you a guide on how to get faster at AoE4. There's a lot of different things that we can do differently in this game, such as improving our hotkeys, simply just getting better muscle memory. But overall, there are some really good habits to build from the beginning, or if you haven't built them yet, that you should get started on. So if you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you have any questions, let me know in the comment section below. I'd be happy to answer them. And yeah, let's get into it. Something you want to consider when you play strategy games in general is the use of control groups. Control groups should always be used because it's one of the main ways that you are going to access your units in fights, outside of fights, and just in general, it's going to help you build up a lot of speed. So, for example, in the beginning of the game, whenever I start, I will always go with control group 3 for my scout. Now, this is not reserved exclusively for the scout. Later on, I can move it to somewhere else. But what is really important to remember here, and something that I encourage you to do, is have a control group in mind for each type of unit. So, for example, control group 3 is always going to be a scout for me early on in the Dark Age. This is easy for me to access, and I can just go back and forth this way. Now, in the Feudal Age, I might start adding in melee infantry. Melee infantry, for me, always goes on 1. Ranged infantry always goes on 2. Cavalry goes on 4. And the scout is also cavalry units, so it's sharing that same hotkey. So when I'm moving around the map, I have a scout with me. And if I don't want that, of course, I can just make it without it. So now the scout's moving on its own, maybe in front of the army, because that's a good thing to do when you're attacking. Always move your scout in front. And so that's the system. What about later on? Well, we have other units that come into play. Knights, men-at-arms, crossbows. And for me, I just keep the same groups here. I use cavalry together, I use melee infantry together, and I use ranged infantry together. Now, you want to not lock yourself into using this exclusively, because there will be fights where micro is going to be really important. For example, you might have archers and crossbows together, and it might make more sense for you to then have these two groups, because the crossbows will kill completely different units than the archers will. The archers will counter spears, and they will kill enemy crossbows, whereas your crossbows will need to kill knights and other armored units. In the late game, for me, I have another system where when I start to use siege, I might have my siege units on 3, I might have my mangonels on 3 and my springles on 4. This scout is being very annoying. I'm thankful that it's gone. So I have these two different control groups. My siege units, sometimes I might just have one big control group and use tab select to go through them. And by that point, I will have a lot of infantry just on one key and a lot of cavalry on just another. It becomes more simple that way, because the most important micro for me is that the units are spread out so they don't die to enemy mangonels, that my cavalry is moving separately, and that my siege units are microed correctly. So if I want to kill these, then I can quickly give them different commands here. That's something that's very important. So one of the first mistakes that I see a lot of people make is when they are selecting buildings, they end up control grouping their buildings all the time. You might have a control group set up that has 1 through 4 for your units, but for your buildings, you might use 6, 7, 8, 9. What's really annoying is whenever you're building a building to then have to control group it like this. So let's say you run archer ranges on 6. Well, archer ranges on 6 is fine. I don't really care about the number too much, whatever's comfortable for you. But what becomes the problem is every time I'm now building an archer range, I now have to add that to the control group to use it. And so I might miss some archer ranges. What we want to do is instead have a preset hotkey for archer ranges. So now, whenever there's no groups on my control group, I simply just have everything selected like this, and then I can start producing. The same thing for like other types, as you can see here. And you can even use this for TCs. And if you want to re-rally, you can use F1 or any other sort of select all military buildings and then do common rally points like this. So I'll show you what it looks like. So you go into View and Remap Controls, Building Selection, and then you can scroll down to where it says Select All, Town Centers, Racks, Archer Ranges, Stables, Siege Workshops, and you can do this with any type of building, really, even the unique ones. Get this to be a Select All, and then you can still override it with your control groups here. But with the Select All, you now no longer have to think about, oh, did I group my new barracks into my control group for my buildings? So that's a really, really important thing to change, because it makes it so much faster. You don't have to go back to your base all the time when you're out here fighting. You can simply click and get the rally points forward, get the units, and look, they're just all selected like that. So a lot faster. You should obviously use control groups. Control groups make your game a lot faster because you can now much easily select the units that you want to micro, and therefore it becomes a lot faster for you to play because now you can micro in the archers onto spears, your horsemen away from spears, onto the archers, whatever. Control groups are great. You should use them. But something that a lot of people forget is the use of select all army, select all navy, and select idle military. So for example, right now I'm pressing select all idle military and my camera is jumping to that because I have my camera set up that way. But let's say I wanted to select my army, which I've done now, and I have something over here. Maybe that's not idle army because it's moving. And now I want everything to move to a certain location. I'm being attacked in the top side here. Well, using select all army here can make sense because I just need all my units to go and defend. But what if I also want to move my ships? So select all army, select all navy becomes especially useful when you sort of run out of control groups. We can't have 7-8 control groups, or well, we could, but it's a lot. And for a casual player or even a semi-pro, this is quite a lot to manage. So what we instead do is we kind of decide, okay, do we want a control group for land? Because that's what we're primarily doing. And we just keep a defensive force on water here. Or is it the opposite? Maybe we want a control group instead of these. We want a control group of ships because we're focusing more on water. Well, whatever it is that you decide to do, using select all army can be a good way to just quickly move stuff on the minimap back and forth this way. You can see here, it's lighting up. Select all army is lighting up. I'm currently moving this. Select all navy, and I can just move back again. Get these hotkeys set up. They're incredibly useful. And some people say you shouldn't use them because there's so much there's even stigma around it. It's like, you shouldn't use select all military because that makes you a worse player. Yes, that's true. You shouldn't only use it. You should use it in combination with control groups. So that's a focus on water or land. Use the control groups where you're going to be focused the most on micro. And then you can use select all navy, select all army, and select idle army to further move units that maybe just needs to attack some place, but you don't need to micro it. Another feature that is often overlooked in AoE4 is the save camera location. There's a little bit of a higher mechanical skill required to use this because you kind of have to remember what it is that's worth to even save as a camera location. Those things are typically the boars. Previously with the Rus old meta, it would be wolves and stuff. It can also be stuff like relics. So let's say I wanted to save this camera location for a relic. Currently, my camera location hotkey is bound to Control F1. And when I then press Shift F1, I get to the camera location. So let's say I'm managing something in my base. And now I want to go to that camera location. I can click Shift F1. I can go back by just double clicking the TC hotkey that I have. So this is pretty simple to bind. Simply go into your settings, hop into camera, and then down here you can see Control F1 to save your camera location. This is a way to make yourself play faster. You don't have to click on your minimap all the time. And overall, you put more actions into your keyboard over your mouse, which is what we are trying to accomplish because it makes us play faster. So the next thing we kind of want to talk about is shift clicking. So shift clicking is where we queue up another command after our initial command. If you've issued a movement command to go somewhere with your scout, you can issue multiple movement commands afterwards. You can do this with dropping off resources, with shift clicking onto units and doing and attacking those units. And so it's something that we actually really want to focus on. When we are doing our build orders, we can get very, very choppy builds if we are not using shift click. See, I already did it here actually. I've put this house here, I've right clicked the house, and then I've shift clicked onto the sheep afterwards because I want my villager to go there and gather sheep once it's done with the house. I don't want this villager to idle. So something like shift clicking here just immediately removes that idle time. And the same thing can be done for the scout. Shift click, shift right click onto the map here, and you'll quickly have a scouting route. Same thing for this stone here. These guys are shift clicked onto the stone, shift click to the wood line here, and they will go gather wood afterwards. If I build this production building here, I will shift click back to sheep afterwards so that it knows, okay, it needs to go back to gathering food. Get used to doing this with every single thing where you know exactly what's going to happen afterwards. You're not ever going to have a villager go to some place, build a house, and then just idle. Always put it back to work afterwards, even if it's something that you might not need. So now we can shift click onto the gold mine here, we can re-rally, and all of a sudden, the next 20 seconds here, we actually don't have to pay attention to our economy at all because everything's just happening naturally. We can still optimize and do like a little teleport here, something cool like that. But again, we've just shift clicked, built this mining camp, shift clicked onto gold. You don't really have to shift click with the mining camp because they will automatically gather gold. But let's say there was a stone outcropping here too. That would make a lot of sense because we want to have it always go to the gold mine in that sense. So yeah, get really good at shift clicking. It improves your gameplay a ton and makes you, well, have a lot less idle time. The next thing you need to get yourself is an idle villager hotkey. A lot of the times when you're playing and you are perhaps forgetting to use the shift click. Let's say I forgot to get this villager to some place. I'll have this idle villager key. And of course, I'm always looking down at the bottom left corner because I'm really good at looking at my macro and knowing what I want to spend. You should be as well. Always looking at this corner to see if you're making vills and units, right? Now there's also this blue button here. And whenever you see this blue button flashing, you shouldn't click on it with your mouse. You should use your idle villager hotkey. It'll jump straight to the unit if you have the correct camera settings. So now, if we have some idle villagers, we can simply put them back. If you have idle villagers in multiple places, you can simply just spam click it so that when you're going someplace, let's say you wanted to go here and start gathering wood, but now you misclicked and now it's idle and you wanted to go onto the berries. Well, all of a sudden you've got 2 idle spots now. Simply looking down here and then getting them to work immediately by using the idle hotkey is what you got to do. So for example, when it comes to idle hotkeys, I currently have unit selection, and then it is cycle through idle economic units. It'll cycle through fishing boats, traders, and villagers that are idle. You can set it to this, and it's a really good hotkey. It's all you need. You don't need all of this select all idle villagers and radios or anything, because you'll always want to have 0 idle villagers. You could have this one shift and then tilde, and I use tilde because it's to the left of my key 1, and that makes it a lot faster for me. Now there are other tools out there that you can use to get a lot faster. One of the main problems that people have is that they click on everything. And clicking on everything means that you put too much stress on your mouse hand, where you want to get as much movement over to your keyboard hand. So when we talk about using shortcuts, hotkeys, anything like control groups and stuff, we're always talking about it because we want to optimize. We want to become faster. Now something like AoE4 has a very cool system here when you're making buildings and stuff, where you press Q and then there's a grid system where you can then build something afterwards. So you could press Q and then Q again for the house, or QW for the mill, right? It's really cool that way. And it's actually a super useful tool as well. So you can practice this, and it's something you should practice. You become a lot faster at building and not have to think about what it is that you have to press. And simply spending 5 minutes every time you start playing, so as a warm-up you could say, you could use this tool and then you could become a lot better at hotkeys. So for example, here it's trying to teach me how to get the correct combination of buttons for building a town center. And it has a really cool integration as well, where you can change the layout depending on what type of keyboard that you have. So let's say we're using QWERTY. We'd like to practice the standard civilizations here and building in H1. Okay, press X here, play again. And now to practice building a house, it'll even show us after a couple seconds. But once you get really good at it, you can then start to make all of these buildings in an instant when you need them. So when you play, you're building something, you instantly build it. You don't have to think about it. You just simply select the villager and you build. If you have to click all the time and find the buildings down here, that's a problem. It's super slow and you want to eliminate that process.